It was late one October night. When I was driving home from work, I was about to pull into my driveway when my neighbor flagged me down. I got out of my car, and he told me about the incident. All of the bodies in the cemetery were dug up. It was the largest cemetery in town, and the bodies had completely disappeared. There had to be about 300 bodies in that cemetery, and I had thought my neighbor was insane when he told me, but I could tell it was true just by the fear and confusion in his eyes. That night, I drove to the cemetery to find out what happened myself. When I arrived, there were police swarming the area, and I was told to go home by one of the officers. I had relatives in that cemetery. One of them was my deceased wife, who had died last year in a freak accident. My half-brother was also buried there, along with my aunts and uncles, and even my grandparents. I had so many questions. How could someone be able to move all 300 of those bodies without someone noticing? How could they possibly dig up every single body? And who would be sick enough to do so? I assumed it must have been a group effort. I went home that night and went to bed. My mind was all over the place and was unable to rest. When I finally shut my eyes, there was a loud banging on the door. It was 6 a.m. I opened the door to see two officers who were going around asking everyone in town if they've seen or heard anything that night. They entered my house and began to ask questions: where I was during the incident, did I see anything suspicious while driving home, etc. About 5 minutes later, they left, and they planned on searching on the other side of town. The cops were all over town. The county decided to prevent the case from entering the local news channel. From what I heard, they wanted to keep the case manageable and didn't want dozens of news reporters swarming the town. It's been about a week later, and I hadn't been able to sleep straight. The cops still haven't been able to find any trace. That day, I was driving to my father's house. My dad lived on the secluded side of town, and everywhere you looked, it was all forest. It's a 40-minute drive to his house, and all forest the entire way there. My dad lived alone with a few other small homesteads around him. When I arrived at my dad's house, he wasn't home. I had no idea where he could have been. He hardly ever left his house. It was on my drive back when I smelled something. I smelled something so horrid that I pulled over on the side of the road to vomit. The air smelled like there were 1,000 corpses surrounding me. I should have reported it to the police. I don't know why I didn't. I should have never investigated the smell by myself. It was getting late. It was around 4 p.m., and I decided to walk into the forest. I covered my nose with my shirt, but even then, the smell still found a way into my nostrils. As I kept walking deeper into the dense forest, I saw an increasing amount of owls. There were owls everywhere. It felt like every tree branch had an owl perched on it. I then saw in the distance an abandoned house. The house was black and covered with ash. It looked to have burned down about a few decades ago and was covered in vines and brush. But the most unsettling feature was the amount of owls. All you could hear were owls all around you. Thousands were calling all around me, and I could barely hear myself think. I've briefly studied about birds in the past, and these owl calls clearly sounded distressed. It felt like they were warning me, trying to keep me away from that house, and that smell was 100% coming from that house. It was so bad, I felt like I was going to pass out. The doorway was just a gaping hole, and my eyes began to water from the horrid smell. The walls and floors were entirely burnt and rotten. My ears began to ring from the owl noises. I followed the smell to the point where I puked even more all over myself this time. In the corner of one of the rooms, I saw a doorway. The stairs led down. I began to walk down them, and at about halfway down the stairs, I could see severed human limbs. It was when I was on the final step when I could see the whole room, piles of corpses, and there was a figure in the middle of the mess. In a fetal position, it was rocking back and forth, humming to itself. It was skinny, so skinny, the spine was exposed. I literally mean the bone was sticking out of the thing. I turned around and made a run for it, my footsteps pounding on the stairs. I was about halfway to the top when I heard the thing sprinting up the stairs behind me. By the time I made it to the top of the stairs, the thing was inches behind me. I was about to make it out the front door when my foot fell through one of the floorboards. I then felt the talons claw into my stomach and drag me back down the basement stairs. I opened my eyes and I saw it. It looked just like an owl. The head, the eyes, the way it moved its neck. It slashed my throat with its talons, then threw me into the pile of corpses. I don't know how I'm still alive. I've lost a lot of blood, and worst of all, I don't know when that thing will come back. If anyone is reading this, I'm probably dead. I'm probably going to rot here with the rest of the 300 dead bodies.